Hello, my name is Valeria Lopez Flores, and this is my exercise 13. So today I'm going to be talking about the Wall of Berlin. It is known that during the Cold War, Berlin was divided into two sides. The east side was occupied by the Soviets, and the west side by allied countries such as the United States, Great Britain, and France. The main reason why this wall was built was because the eastern side didn't want the fascist Western ideologies to cross over into the eastern side. So, they built the Berlin Wall in order to separate the two sides of Berlin. This wall was built on August 13, 1961, and it was eventually destroyed on November 9, 1989. Here are some pictures of the Berlin Wall in different years. Now, the Cold War. The Cold War is known as the rivalry that surged after World War II between the USSR and the United States. It began during the 1947 and eventually came to an end on 1991. This conflict is characterized for being one that developed during a very long time and also because of its economical and political propaganda. The main cause of the Cold War were the opposing ideologies between the nations previously mentioned, as well as the desire to be the most powerful and predominant nation. This event had had a lot of relevance in the construction of the Berlin Wall. It is due to this event that it was built. Errors committed by the leaders that led to the crisis in the USSR. First of all, we have Leonid Brezhnev. Some of Brezhnev's biggest mistakes were his indecisiveness when taking important decisions. He was leading the Soviet Union into disaster. His excessive spending on weapons led to the beginning of the downfall of the Soviet economy. Yuri Andropov. After the Soviet Union was left in terrible economic conditions by Brezhnev, Andropov was old and had fragile health. His main error was doing nothing in order to stop the decline of the economy. Instead, he prolonged it. And finally, Konstantin Chernenko. Chernenko's main goal was to continue Andropov's Soviet reforms, yet he offered nothing new in order to stop the declining economy or anything regarding new reforms. They were still the same as always. The Soviet Union was getting closer to its last days. The politics of Mikhail Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev brought new ideas and reforms into the Soviet Union. He was the one who knew changes needed to be made for the Soviet Union to prevail. In order to achieve this, he needed to implement measures that were considered bold during those times. These reforms and new policies were based on individual freedom and new policies to restore the economy. This was mainly done through the Sinatra and Glasnost. The Sinatra doctrine established Eastern blocs, which were more autonomous. Previously, the affairs of other Soviet countries were tightly controlled. The Glasnost policies, they allowed the ease of censorship laws. They aimed to make the USSR's government transparent, and the accessibility to government affairs would be easier. The domino effect that began in Poland. In 1988, civil strikes began to take place in Poland against the communist government. The main goal of these strikes was to generate pressure due to the need of political change. There were many people who sympathized with the cause and joined the strikes. This movement was named Solidarity, and it was led by Lech Walesa. Eventually, they gained what they sought for, after 40 years of communist rule. The reason why it is called the domino effect, it is due to the reason that after these events broke out, other nations under communist rule began to speak up and more movements were created. Some of these countries were Hungary, Bulgaria, and Eastern Germany. The fall of the Berlin Wall. The fall of the Berlin Wall took place on November 9, 1989. The way in which this news was revealed created a huge misunderstanding that led to the fall of the wall. Gunther Schabowski announced that Eastern Germans would be able to travel to the western side, except he forgot to mention that regulations would still prevail. This caused a huge multitude to form on the wall, as many people were desperate to see family that had gotten separated due to the wall. Eventually, they crossed it, and this was the first step to the reunification of Germany. Social consequences. Some of the social consequences of the fall of the communist bloc were big Though it may seem as everything would be nice after the end of the bloc, there were many changes, especially in the countries which used to be under communist rule, such as cultural changes and more social disorder. The levels of corruption in Russia began to increase. After the fall of the socialist bloc, the United States became the leading global power. One of the most positive aspects after the fall of the Berlin Wall in Germany was that many families were able to reunite after many years of being separated. Conclusion. In conclusion, the bad decisions of the Soviet leaders led to the dissolvement of the USSR. The fact that they didn't renew their policies or make some changes was one of the leading factors of its dissolvement. Many leaders that took power noticed the declining economy of the Soviet Union, but due to their old age and traditionalist ideas, they didn't do anything in order to change it and prevent disaster from coming. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the social movements that took place on nations under socialist rule, a new period in world history began. The unification of Germany was something that really had a huge impact in the world, since the wall used to represent the differences in ideologies between the US and the Soviet Union.